Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dr. Tovar. I'm the founder and CEO of Prometheus. We specialize in academic support services for pre-med medical students as it relates to academic skills. And today we have a very good presentation. We've got some really good tools and tips that will help you guys do better now. And we also have a special guest that will be presented down the line. Dr. Ryan Asteris will be joining us shortly. So we have a lot to cover. We only have an hour to do this show, so I'm going to get started. So thank you for joining us. The topic for today is academic success. And we'll get started here. All right, so this is the webinar structure. We'll be doing the introduction. So, we're going to try to get as real and raw as possible, talking about the problems, the pain, and the solution to a lot of the issues and challenges that you guys have these days. I'm going to turn off my camera for a little bit because it's echoing. And then we're going to move on to the Dr. Ryan Asteris' Prometheus alumnus testimonial. Then, of course, we'll move into the hot seats, and the hot seats will be an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about the struggles and the journey that you're experiencing, and giving me a problem that I can solve for you so that it can help you get to your goal in 90 days. Once we're done with the hot seats, we'll get into the academic skills for success portion of the webinar, which will include the FRAC method. Now, I will say this before we go further. I was trying to think of a better way to summarize and cover as much as possible when it comes to the 8 key skills to academic success as it relates to your years in the pre-medicine years. And I found that probably the most important one would be the FRAC method. So I decided to focus my entire efforts on the FRAC method because I believe that that is the one thing that is more likely to give you results in the immediate future. So in the next week or 2 weeks, you should start seeing results if you start applying some of the concepts that we'll introduce during the FRAC method part. Of course, at the end, we'll have a Q&A, and then last but not least, some closing statements and comments. So let's jump right in. So some of you may be asking yourselves, why am I here, right? Why am I here? Why should I be here? Why should I even listen to Dr. Tovar, who's talking right now about academic skill success? Why should I even care, right? And a lot of you may be having a lot of different thoughts going through your head. Some of you may be under the impression that you don't have what it takes to get into medical school, something that's very known and recognized in the industry as the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome has a lot to do with, do I have the intelligence to get into medical school, or do I not? And I can tell you from my experience, it doesn't really take genius level IQ to get into medical school. What it really takes is resourcefulness. And resourcefulness is more of a mindset and a strategy to be able to get into a plan that actually gives you the results. The results being, doing well in your classes, getting a high GPA, and doing extremely well on the MCAT, which I'll get into that in a little bit. Also, some of you may be thinking, well, learning is kind of an activity I avoid because, I just really don't have a clue on how to even do it. And let's be honest, I have myself been a victim of this mentality because it's something real and something very common that happens with everybody. So if you feel like you don't know how to study, it is not entirely your fault. It's probably a result of years and years of being in the current educational system, which promotes a lot of linear thinking skills. And those, unfortunately, are not something that are going to translate into you doing really well on school or even doing well on the MCAT. So another thing that a lot of people will experience pain with would be, I study, but I cannot retain the information. Or if you study and you're able to retain the information, you're not able to carry that information for a long period of time. Okay? Another thing would be the MCAT scares me. The MCAT scares me would be another thing that is very common. But the MCAT is not such a unattainable feat, so to speak. It's something it's not simple. It requires strategy, and it requires attention, and it requires strategy. So we'll get into that in a minute. Also, academic planning. A lot of people don't put a lot of effort into planning even what you're going to do tomorrow. You probably spend more time on social media than you do, thinking about, okay, if nothing else happens tomorrow, what are my 3 goals? What are my 4 goals that I need to do in order to be able to get ready for this MCAT that's coming down 2 or 3 years down the line? Or maybe you're in your junior year or your, or sophomore year of college, and you're starting to think about getting ready for the MCAT. That's something that you can do on a daily basis. You don't have to wait until the summer before the MCAT to start studying. Another thing people experience a lot of pain with is a study schedule, which, a lot of people think is something very simple to do, but in reality is not. And last but not least, anxiety and uncertainty over the future. So that's something that we all struggle with. That's something that, we struggle with probably on a day-to-day basis. So creating certainty and creating the circumstances that will improve the outcomes are probably some things that you need to focus more. So what do I care about? So hashtag med student problems. So a lot of people think about, belief systems are something that's reinforced by social circles, right? So if you are surrounded by a certain mentality or certain group of people that think a certain way, then chances are you're not going to do well changing your mindset and moving on to things that will actually provide you with results. Another thing that you should care about is using the right resources and not getting a yield. So a lot of people experience that, think, oh, well, if I use the Princeton Review course, this will help me do well on the exam. No, not the case. Not the case. In a lot of cases, using the tool or knowing how to use the tool is a lot more important than the tool itself. So a lot of people experience and think, oh, if I just buy the Kaplan course, if I just buy the Princeton course, then that will get me somewhere. But those tools make a huge assumption that you know how to study, okay? And this is where we excel at in Prometheus. And one of the reasons I created the academic success course for pre-med students was to help students bridge the gap between using a resource and studying well and learning. Another thing that is a very common med student problem is they think memorization is low. So if I get a list of things or a set of concepts and I can just learn those and memorize those, then that equals learning. Well, the problem with that is that memorization doesn't last for a long time. It has a high rate of degradation. Degradation meaning, you tend to forget it. So that strategy does not work. Okay. And even if you were to have a photographic memory and learn everything there is to know about biochemistry or physics or biology or anatomy and physiology, if you don't know how to use that information and apply it to a real problem, then you're probably not going to do well in the MCAT. But if you're lucky to get through the MCAT and into medical school, then you're probably going to have a really hard time in medical school exams and board exams. So believe me, that never goes away. It always comes back to haunt you if you don't take care of it now. Another thing is that, if you learn, then you should be able to get a grade. That's another medical student problem, is that they think, learning, if I learn, then that should translate into a grade. Again, we go back to the same issue, which is application. A lot of people don't spend enough time figuring out, okay, so I've learned this body of information, how can I apply it to solve a problem, right? And unfortunately, too, another problem we have is we focus a lot on grades, but not solving real problems. And another problem students have is there's really no real study strategy. You just kind of just sit down and read slides and memorize and hope for the best, and relying on hope versus a system that is based on predictability in a way that you can measure predictability, then your chances of doing well on the MCAT and getting into medical school are not going to be as good. We'll move on to the solution portion of this presentation, which is your ability to actually get into medical school has a lot to do with how you perceive yourself. So, again, we talk about the concept of mindset. So if you have a mindset of, I'm not gonna do well, or I'm not good at studying, or I'm not good at retaining information, believe me, that will translate into actually happening. It'll translate into reality. So always having a mindset that maybe perhaps like myself, I'm no genius. I always told myself, if I can apply myself and apply the academic skills as it relates to studying better and more efficiently, then by logic, then I should be able to perform well in my courses. So I always went in with that mentality, with optimism, and with the fact that you're probably going to fall a few times, but falling and failing is not a bad thing, as Dr. Ryan Esteras is going to tell you about in a little bit. It's actually an opportunity for learning. So you've got to change the way that you look at failure. You got to look at the way that you look at making mistakes. Those are very necessary steps into actually growing, not just as a person, as a student, as a future doctor. It's a very important thing to do. Another solution is, relying more on resourcefulness and strategy before you rely on your intelligence. Now, I'm not saying intelligence is bad. I'm saying that a lot of people just rely on their intelligence, and I am guilty of having made that mistake in the past, and they forget about the strategy, and they forget about the resourcefulness. They forget about how important mentors are in anything that you do in life. If you look at anybody, for example, in sports, who is anybody in sports, for example, Michael Jordan had a mentor. LeBron James had a mentor. Bill Gates had a mentor. So everybody that's had some level of success in life has had a mentor and has had a strategy and has been able to be resourceful in life. Another solution I have would be to develop the strategy and skills, like I've said before, that you need to get into medical school and to get through medical school, right? Because it's not just enough to get into medical school, you also have to be able to survive it. But in my preference, I would not only like to survive it, I'd like to thrive. So in other words, be successful in it, right? And the academic success scores does that for you. It also helps you leverage available resources versus making your own resources. So in other words, I've seen a lot of students in the past that come to me for help, and when I start looking at what resources they're using, they are making all their notes. And when I ask them, well, how long did it take you to make notes for this particular class? And they're like, oh, it took me like 2-3 hours, and it looks beautiful. It's got like different colors and different highlighting, and and all kinds of different bells and whistles, which is great. But, if you can go out into the marketplace, into Amazon or Google, and find those notes, because believe me, there's a ton of resources available out there that you can just buy and tweak and leverage those resources for your benefit. So, and a lot of people think, well, I don't understand leveraging. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if you're living right now in this day and age, you're probably already living a leveraged lifestyle. So, in other words, when I say, or when somebody asks you to go to the store and get milk, for example, you're not going to go outside and build your own car so that you can go and get milk, right? You're going to either call Uber, or you're going to, I don't know, get DoorDash or Uber Eats to come get you what you need. But you're not necessarily going to go out and build a car, right? Well, it's the same analogy when it comes to studying. Use the resources that are available, and don't go out there and make yourself stuff, because it's just going to take you too much time, and you don't have time. You don't have time now, and you're definitely not going to have time when you get into medical school. Okay? I think mentors is another thing that we talked about already. Very, very important. We provide mentors in our courses. There's actually 3 ways to get into our courses. One of them is one-on-one, which provides you with 1 hour of personalized attention. And there's a group rate also as well, which provides a certain group of people with access to they have to share one advisor or one mentor. And then there's a self-guided course. A lot of the times people want to just do it self-guided, and that's fine, but I can tell you, you get a lot more for your time and for your money if you just get a mentor along with the course that you buy, because it's going to be so much better for you, because you get accountability, and you're also going to get somebody with experience that's going to guide you in a better way. Another solution is the science of success, and that's something that it's a concept that was actually read the book by Gary Keller. Gary Keller is one of the leading real estate moguls in the U.S., billions of dollars, and wrote a book called The One Thing. In this book, he talks about the science of success. And in the science of success, he says, it's something that you can't see, you can't touch, but if you do it every day, it'll give you long-term results, right? So a lot of people don't buy into it because they don't see it. So if they don't see it, they think, well, it doesn't exist. But in the science of success, you're not going to be able to see the effects of what you're doing right away. But as you keep building up on those skills and keep doing them every day, you will see results down the line. Another problem a lot of people have, including myself, is, they don't want to invest in themselves. In other words, I don't want to spend money to get, the Kaplan review course that I need, or, the tutor that I need to get better at, organic chemistry or physics or biology or what have you. Listen, everybody's going to have to do this at some point in their career or another, and you're going to have to invest outside of whatever you have to pay for education. So, you don't necessarily have to pay for education to the university or college that you go into, but you're also going to have to buy extra resources, whether it be for notes or, Q banks or practice question banks. That is just not going to stop. So there's really no way around that. You're just going to have to make peace with that. So again, one of the things that I was talking about is, the pre-med academic success course. There's 3 ways to purchase it. If you're interested in it, I think it'll give you a lot of very good material and very good concepts for you to be successful in pre-med, and it's going to set you up nicely for the MCAT, because a good GPA, good MCAT, well-rounded CV, well-rounded extracurricular activities, shadowing a doctor. I mean, those are things that any medical school admissions committee is going to be looking at. So there's three ways to get it: self-guided. If that's something that you think you need, you want to upgrade down the line, you can always do that as well. There's the one-on-one option and the group rate, which we talked about. All right, so we move into the next phase of our webinar, which is Sir Ryan Esteves. And Ryan was in your position not too long ago as a pre-med. He went through the pre-med process at Tulane University, and he just recently graduated from LSU School of Medicine. Ryan has been working with me and my team for about the last 4 years or so, and he will be answering some questions about his experiences with Prometheus during medical school. So everybody, please welcome Dr. Ryan Esteves. Ryan, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Tovar. Thanks for that. I didn't think I was a Hall of Fame star, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are you still there, Ryan?
I am. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Ryan? Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Tovar. Thank you for that introduction. And you said you had some questions for me.
I do. So I guess first and foremost, you were able to overcome a lot of major academic challenges. First and foremost, I guess, how did you hear about us? And then can you tell us about your challenges during medical school?
Sure. I'll take the first question. I first heard about Prometheus and Dr. Tovar during the American Medical Student Association annual convention. I was the election committee chairman for AMSA at the time, and I had the opportunity to attend the AMSA Expo. And Dr. Tovar had a booth, and he had his academic resource materials to help medical students for their medical education. I thought I gave it a try, and 4 years later, I'm happy to say that a large part of my success was because of Dr. Tovar and Prometheus.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Can you give us a few examples briefly on the challenges that you had during medical school?
Sure. So I would say I have the usual student challenges, and then I had some unusual challenge during medical school. The unusual challenges were just probably what everybody goes through, adjusting to the medical school environment, from adjusting to the first year of medical school, adjusting to studying for a marathon of board exams, adjusting to clinical rotations. And I also had my share of life challenges. I had some health conditions that affected my education. I had some exam setbacks, and I don't think I ever told you this, but I had, during my last board exam, I had the power go off during the middle of my exam, and we actually prepared for that. And so I got through that, and even had a death in the family that had to go through. So life does happen even through medical school.
Okay, so how were we? I guess if you could put in the simplest way possible, how were we able to help you overcome those challenges?
All right. So let's start with the transition to medical school or to the medical studies. So Prometheus has their resources, which he's gone over, but he can talk more about later in the presentation. Time management, that's probably one of the most important resources, skills to have, and they're very good about that. They'll help create a schedule for you, and you'll find that there are some specific things that will help you with your time management, creating a schedule for yourself. They'll help you understand how you learn. Like, there's different ways people learn, how you process information, and then the resources. There are key resources for each subject that people can use. And instead of going through all these other resources that might not be helpful, they'll can key on the most important resources. They'll go over. They want to help over the study methods, the methods that would help you to be best work in the med school environment, how to focus, test taking skills, how to deal with anxiety, and even the most important part is having the right attitude and motivation. So all of those things are probably things we've seen before, but it's good to have to refresh in a new light. And if you haven't had this information before, definitely make sure you know this information, these skill sets. But probably
All
the
right.
biggest help I would say is having a mentor or coach and a team of professionals that was there for me. I think that was probably the key. Um, I like to think of our medical training similar to the process of being a pro athlete with his or her coach, because we are training to be professionals. There are many books and resources that say that if you want to learn and master something effectively and efficiently, then we need to learn from the experiences of people before us, and that is what coaches do for professional athletes. And having a medical mentor like Dr. Tovar can do the same thing for us.
All right. Thanks for that information, Ryan. I mean, I do from what I recall working with you, one of the biggest challenges that we had together was trying to figure out how to get you the yields that you were looking for. And when I remember when we were looking at your study schedule for one of the board exams, you kept kind of hitting a plateau. So in other words, plateau. You were not able to on your practice exams be able to score and break through that plateau and be able to score higher. So what was helpful during that process that helped you see how you study differently?
I would say the study skill is probably one of the big things, but then the application is the next best things where you have to use questions. I think that's the differences of successful students on exams anyway, is make sure that you do lots of practice questions, but not just do lots of practice questions, but do it in a systematic, correct way. There are different ways how to go through practice questions, but learning from your mistakes, learning from the right answer, but also the wrong answers, all the different option choices are probably the biggest benefits for those exams.
Right. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think one of the things that we had some trouble with was um, focusing more on getting a good foundation and not just focusing on the questions, which is I think the application piece of the studying method is important, but even more importantly is before you get to the questions, having a good foundation to actually be able to answer the questions. But you bring up a good point, Ryan, and that's the fact that even in my pre-med years, I mean, I don't even recall using QBank or question bank questions for my studying when it came to studying for biochemistry or studying for physics or studying for the MCAT even, which sounds crazy, but I wonder how many of the pre-meds joining us today are actually using question banks to help them study. Were you using question banks back then, Ryan?
I've used them, but actually, I didn't use it as much as my classmates, I would say. But I do want to touch on that is that to earn the right to do these questions, you have to have the foundation because when you do the questions, you'll just get frustrated if you don't have that foundation, the knowledge before doing the questions. So, I mean, that point is valid. Is that you need to have the foundation first, the knowledge first, before you can start
Absolutely.
doing the questions, and then go back to the foundation, go back to the questions. It's sort of a balanced process with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know Ryan's got to go. He's got another engagement to go to right now. So I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Esteras, for joining us today and giving us your perspective and your experience. Any last words of advice for the pre-meds joining us today?
Yeah. So first, I want to thank you for having me on here, and I do have to go because I have another meeting in 15 minutes. But if you need any more information, if you want to contact me about Prometheus, about working with Dr. Tovar and his other doctors and mentors, I can definitely do that for you, and I can give you my personal advice. But it's probably the best thing is like you have to have a positive attitude through this entire process. It is going to be a long, hard process that you don't see the benefits until later. But if you have a great attitude, if you have a positive mindset, that can get you through just about any challenge. So um, stay strong and believe in yourself that you can do it, and then good things will happen. Thank you
All
very much.
right. All right, Ryan. Well, thank you for joining us. I wish you well, and I guess we'll stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Dr.
All right. So let's really jump into the meat of the webinar here. And let's talk about some stuff, some hot seats. I don't want to call anybody out, but if I have to, I will. And again, this is for your benefit. So if you want to pick up the microphone and talk and tell us what your name is and where you are and what is the one challenge that I can help you with right now, then we can get going. So now is your chance to jump in and allow me to help you in whatever way I can. Do we have any takers? All right, let's see. I think somebody's responding here. Go ahead. I think Fred's got a question here, so go ahead, Fred. I can read it for you, or you can chime in and talk. Don't be shy. Fred says, during my freshman year in college, I had a rough patch. I was welcomed by a semester recovering from a major strike from the students and the disaster that occurred on the island in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. During the semester, I also had a death in the family. I am so sorry to hear about that, Fred. So I wasn't in the best headspace for what was coming for me. My grades were really affected, and it's been hard to look for research opportunities and extracurricular activities that can accept a student with my current GPA. Okay, so I guess first and foremost, how I would approach this situation. It sounds like you are, trying to boost up your extracurricular activities and research opportunities, which is great. But one of the things that I would focus more of my time and effort would be into improving your GPA, because it sounds like from the way that you worded your question, it may be preventing you from actually getting into the opportunities and activities that you're looking for. So one of the things would be to actually get in with one of our mentors and figure out a way that we can help you boost up that GPA. So in other words, trying to figure out what your deficits are in learning. Is it your studying skills? Is it your, active? Are you more of an active versus a passive learner? Are you using the right resources? A lot of students just study from slides that their professors provide for them and just use the book that their professors provide for them. And we'll get into more of that in a few minutes. But I would say the most important thing is figuring out a way to boost your GPA so that you're able to get those opportunities and get those activities that you're looking for outside of the academic realm. But in answering your question directly, research opportunities and extracurricular activities should be in line with your interests, right? So if you're thinking about what kind of doctor you're going to be, so for example, if you have your mindset on surgery, you have to be able to find yourself, shadowing activities, maybe perhaps going to a local surgeon and saying, hey, I really just want to, I'm interested in surgery. I'm a pre-med student and really want to just shadow you one day a week and see what you do. And that's a great way to establish a relationship, maybe create a relationship with a mentor. But, the short end of the answer is to boost your grades, you're really going to have to look into the way that you're studying. And, how are you approaching exams? Do you have a study schedule? How does that study schedule look? Are you good with time management? Are you using more than one resource for your tests? How are you preparing for the MCAT? All those things need to be looked at with a fine-tooth comb. And if Ryan was here, he can tell you that, we had the same process that we had to go through to be able to arrive at the problem of his situation. So it's not an easy answer. However, I will say, at the point where you are right now, there's a lot more opportunity for improvement if you use one of the academic success scores and take it with a mentor So that way you get the accountability piece that will help you actually reach the goals that you need to reach. So the short of the answer is yes, there's hope even for you. You know, and it's just a matter of figuring out, you know, if you're actually doing the things that you're supposed to be doing to be able to get ahead. That's all. See, so Fred chimed in and he said, I have already been raising my GPA. Hopefully he will end the semester with a 3.5. Good job. Okay. So, and then he says, but I fear that my past can affect how med schools and research programs look at me as a student. Well, if that is how you feel, Fred, I can tell you that you came to the right place, because one of the problems I had, and one of the reasons I created Prometheus, was because I was in the same shoes that you were, not in pre-med, but in medical school. You know, I failed 2 courses during medical school. I failed the board exam multiple times during medical school. So I was able to raise my GPA and raise my scores and actually be able to do well once I did pass that board exam, and I had a great score on it. But I was stuck with, how do I, you know, spin, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, how do I spin my experience into a positive one? And we actually have created a course specifically to address students like you, okay? And in short, that is something called the API method, right? So A stands for accountability. So whenever you get ready to go into medical school application process, then you have to, somewhere in the application, somewhere in your personal statement, maybe even on an interview, if you are able to get one, to, you know, show these people your accountability. So saying, you know, this happened because of X, Y, and Z, and I know that. I know maybe part of that has to do with, you know, my the hurricane and the death of my family, but it also made me look into how I was studying, and then I realized that maybe my study methods were not up to speed with where I needed to go. So that's the A part. The P is planning, right? So planning to make sure that it doesn't happen again, right? So you have to show the committee that's looking at your application that you have made sure that you're not going to let something like this happen again in the future. But you have to be very specific in how you're going to do that, right? So you're going to take a Princeton review course for the next, you know, or you're going to take a course that's going to help you getting have a smooth transition into medical school. Those are the things that I would want to hear if I was in an admissions committee looking at your application, right? And then the I stands for intervention, right? So what things are you doing actively to make sure that your plan gets done, gets into effect? And I've found great success with that process, just using the API method. So it's just a way that you need to, you know, any failure and any challenge, there's a way that you need to be able to present that to other people in a way that shows how much you've learned and grown from that challenge. Okay, so and you need somebody that knows how to navigate that process. We just happen to be one of those firms, but I'll tell you, there's the counselor might be help you with that as well. But they one of the things that we excel at is because, you know, I was actually in your shoes. I have walked. I not only have can tell you about it, but I've actually experienced this myself. So it's a different perspective when you have somebody on your team, on your side, helping you kind of spin around a bad situation into a good one. And there's always a way to do that. All right. Well, that was great. Thanks for sharing, Fred. I really appreciate it. We're going to move on for the sake of time onto our next phase, which is actually some of the things that maybe some of you have been waiting for. And that is the FRAC method. You know, and let me step back for a minute and tell you guys that I was thinking really hard into how to help you guys the most. And I think out of the 8 skills that I've listed in previous in the academic success scores, I think one of the one of the modules in our course, which is, well, we have 8 modules in the course for pre-med academic success. This would be probably one of the best ones out there. So I'm going to do my best to relay some really good information to the few people that are here in the presentation with us, in the hopes that it will help you get to a better GPA and a better academic situation so that you can get into medical school. Okay, so the FRAC method is basically a new way of studying, and it introduces a couple of things, right? So one of the things that it introduces is higher order learning skills and critical thinking skills, right? So critical thinking skills is hard to understand at first when you're used to kind of linear thinking kind of methods. And critical thinking is basically best illustrated by the dilemma of the cube. So the dilemma of the cube is a way to look at information, right? So the information in this case is represented by the cone inside this box, right? And the peepholes to look at this box are the resources that you're using, right? So in a linear way of thinking, which is usually the most common way that most colleges, structure their curriculum, is linear thinking. In other words, they give you one subject, one course, one set of slides, one book, and you're tested on that, right? So there's really not a lot of challenge when everything's kind of one. You just have to be responsible for information coming from one source. Let me tell you, when you get into medical school, you can be tested. The subject area is what's tested. So it can be anything within that test, within that subject, that will be tested. It doesn't necessarily have to come from the slides or the required textbook. Anything is fair game. So in thinking about critical thinking, the way that you should approach your subject, which is represented by the cone in this picture, is, you should look at it from different areas, right? So in college right now, some of you may be looking at subjects just through, like, for example, peephole A, which if you look at peephole A, you'll see that you're looking at a triangle. So you think, oh, inside the box is a triangle. And when you look at the entire thing, the reality is different. Or if you look through peephole B, then you look down and you say, well, this could be a circle or it could be a sphere. I don't know, right? So, but once you start looking at this cube from different angles, right? So making peepholes from different areas, then you start realizing that what's inside this box is actually a cone, right? So this is an analogy in the way that you should look at subjects, right? So you should use different resources that allow you to have different perspectives on the subject, and it gives you a better idea of what the subject or the topic is about. So that, in essence, is critical thinking. Higher order learning is another way to look at how to learn better. So most students that have a hard time with the MCAT or in medical school are usually are used to using the bottom 2 tiers of this pyramid, which is understanding and remembering, which are very linear ways of looking at information. So in other words, I just name, identify, remember, or recognize something or describe something, which is very low in the totem pole for learning when it comes to learning. Then understanding, so you're like explaining or summarizing, paraphrasing things. But when you start getting above understanding and you start looking into applying information, and applying information, again, we'll go back to using practice questions to be able to apply the information that you learn on a daily or weekly basis, right? Then you get into analyzing. So you figure out, okay, well, how is this information different from this other set of information? How can we compare and contrast, So then you move on to evaluating. So then you start figuring out, okay, well, what's the priority here? What thing do I need to look at first? you start making judgments on information. And then the top of the tier is creating. So in other words, once you start looking at everything that you learn, and like, for example, you start creating your own set of notes using something that you bought, that's creation of using the information that you learned. That's like the epitome of higher order learning. So once you start using the top 4 tiers here in this pyramid, is when you start really learning, not just for the now, but for the long run, right? So another topic that also helps when you look at the FRAC method is spacing and interleaving. We'll get into the FRAC method in a little bit. But spacing is basically looking at studying information at different times, right? Different sets of intervals. Not looking at information like most people do, which is like the way I did back in college was, you don't study anything until maybe the week before the exam. And that may be okay for now because, you may not need to know that much information. So it's easier for you to cram and memorize and learn and take the test and do well. But what happens after you take the test is you forget it all, right? So the way to remember things and to remember things for the long haul is to, if you look at this picture here, on this graph, on the y-axis is the retention rate, and on the x-axis is the days, right? So when you study, when you first learn information, let's say you have 100% retention, right? But by the end of day 1, you've already lost 20% of that information. And if you keep going and you don't look at that information for day 2 or 3, by day 3 you have already forgotten everything, right? So spacing is figuring out a way to learn something. Then on day 1 you review, right? So you review on day 1, which pushes you back to 100% retention. Then you wait until the 3rd day from the first day that you learned this, and you review again, and that boosts again your retention back to 100. So if you keep repeating this process, and again, using spacing and interleaving, so in other words, skipping around, skipping subject, so in between here, between day 1 and 3, you're probably going to learn something else, or maybe study another class, another topic. That's what interleaving means, is just, being able to interleave or take turns between subjects, right? And the spacing occurs when you start reviewing the same topic or the same subject over time. So what happens over time, if you look here, is you start this curve here starts changing in slope. Well, as you can see, day 6, it takes a lot longer for you to lose 20% of that information. Where over here, when you first started, it took just 1 day. Over here, it takes maybe 3 days, right? So over time, that slope changes, and you start gaining long-term memory as opposed to short-term memory. Okay, and all of our systems of learning and information for the academic success scores use this. Like whenever you start looking at time management, we work together with you to build a study schedule that actually applies this concept. So that's what Dr. Stairs was talking about in using the study schedule. And again, the stuff that you don't know, but then over time it starts really paying off. So now I'll introduce the FRAC method. The FRAC method is basically an acronym. F stands for foundation, R for refinement, A for application, and C for connections. Right. So for the foundation step, the best way I can describe foundation is you got to understand the big picture, right? So there are 2 components when it comes to foundation. One is previewing, and then active listening during class. So previewing the topic or the subject before class, and then doing some active listening and note-taking during class, right? So before you attend class, you look at your curriculum and your course syllabus for guidance, right? And you try to use high-yield books and resources, right? So I have 2 right there for you, and these are just one example of some of the books that you can use. There's many on the subject, and there's many different free resources. Like one of the ones I really like that prepares you well for the MCAT is the Khan Academy, Khan, and it's completely free. All you got to do is sign up, create an account, and you have access to a lot of good material, and it's free. So previewing material before attending class. So using a high yield resource. So for example, if you're studying biochemistry, like in this case, you can get a Lippincott's review book that talks about, and you can just look at the outline. Let's say they're talking about, I don't know, organic bonds or whatever the case may be. You go look for your table of contents. You find what you need. You go in there, you read it. You read the section. It takes about 4 or 5 pages. Takes you 15, 20 minutes, and you're done, right? So you use those books as a starting point, and it's a great way to get the feel for what material is important, right? Because chances are, if it's the MCAT subject review course, or if it's in Lippincott's biochemistry, believe me, it's going to be on the MCAT. And if it's going to be on the MCAT, it's probably going to be on your test. So there's really no mystery around here. Okay? So as you read the stuff, as you read your high yield resource, you either be the biochemistry Lippincott's book or the MCAT subject review course and the Pritzker review, you start creating notes. And you create notes in a central place, right? So I call it a note repository. So a note repository is like one book. I typically like to use like the MCAT books or the Pritzker review or the first aid books. I don't know if there's the first aid for pre-med, but there is one for med students. So I would use one of those and just start taking notes. You know, so if my topic was on, I don't know, any topic in biochemistry, I'll look for that topic in that book and then write notes on the sideline. And that way I started building up a great body of notes. But listen, guys, don't ever create a whole set of notes from scratch. It's just a huge waste of time. You know, going back to what I said about leveraging things that are available for you, it's a lot better if you just buy something and you tweak it or build it or make something, create it or change it in the way that works for you, right? So the second step is once you material, then you go to lecture, right? And you apply active listening and you take notes. And you can use a different color pen or, you know, a different way to tell you that this is another set of notes that you collected during class, right? So you record, you know, the professor's main points in your own words. Don't try to write word for word. And do attempt to write down the important details of the lecture, right? So specific examples that will help you understand things and remember concepts later, right? So throughout the process, you know, you should think of yourself as a librarian, right? So your job is to kind of sort and organize information in a way that you can easily access it and review it later for the exam, right? So your library catalog is the note repository that I was talking about before, right? So figuring out what that note repository works for you is important. So then you repeat this process and you keep. The second step of the FRAC method is refinement, right? So during the last step, which is, you know, during the active listening during lecture and the reviewing of the material before you get to class, you start collecting something called learning issues, right? And those learning issues are what you're going to focus on when it comes to the refinement stage, right? So this is a great time to use reference style books. Usually most textbooks that are given by that are required by your course are reference style books. So in other words, they're like super thick, they're like 300 pages. Getting to one chapter is going to take you like, you know, 2-3 hours. You know, that's not the type of book that you want to start out with. You want to start out with something easy, something that you can digest in the foundation part of the FRAC method, and that's going to set you off in a way that you can understand things quickly, and then you can start worrying about the details in the refinement stage, right? So the refinement stage is about details, and it's about learning issues. So in other words, things that you don't understand that you need to further elaborate on, That's what the refinement part is about, okay? Then we move into the application part. So in other words, you get to practice what you learned, right? And this is where the question banks come in, right? Now, a lot of students, they want to wait until the summer before the MCAT to actually start using these questions, which I think is a huge mistake, because these questions are going to help you in 3 ways. First way is you're going to develop something called exam schemata, right? So exam schemata is a diagrammatic representation or a model or a pattern that exists in exams, right? So in doing practice questions, you're going to be exposed to the way questions will be asked on the MCAT, right? The style, the content, the format, and this can further guide how you will study on exams, not just for the MCAT, but also for the exams that you're taking like right now, right? And you can make better predictions on the material that you need to focus on, right? So it gives you a clear picture of how the material is going to be presented and asked on a question, okay? So in other words, you kind of get into the minds of the test makers, which is, I found very helpful. Once I started using practice questions, it was extremely helpful, right? The other way it helps you is it helps you review information, right? So you get a chance to look at your answer choices, look at what, why an answer choice was right, and looking at other the other answer choices that can help you learn more about other things, and also learn on why the other answer choices were wrong. Okay, so that is how I find that these question banks can be really helpful for you guys as you move along into your pre-med years. Lastly, the last step in the FRAC method, which is C, is connections, right? So you start establishing relationships across different subject areas, right? So you start developing something that I call portals of access. So usually a concept that you start building that kind of crosses different subject areas like biochemistry and anatomy and physiology, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that, is very important, because one thing will trigger a whole other set of concepts that will help you retain information, right? So a good example that's kind of ingrained in my head is, the Bernoulli equation of liquids when it comes to physics, right? So there's going to be a section whenever you take physics, or if you've already taken physics, where it talks about, I can't remember the exact words, but it's like the study of volume and flow, and as it comes in relates to vessels, right? So the Bernoulli equation states that the diameter of a vessel influences the pressure of the liquid inside the vessel, right? And the pressure inside the vessel also regulates the flow for which that liquid passes through that vessel, right? So that is a quick way that I put together a concept in physics, and I brought it into the concept in anatomy and physiology of blood vessels and blood pressure, right? So it helped me understand in a very easy way that if somebody comes in with a high blood pressure, then chances are the blood flow through that vessel is going to be a lot faster than somebody that, say, was not having a high blood pressure, right? So how does that affect a blood vessel, and how does that relate into the pathology of things? Is that high flow system is going to start damaging the elasticity of your arteries, and it does create problems and kinks down the line, which causes stenosis and causes heart trouble and all those other things that you guys are going to learn about in anatomy and physiology and down the line once you get into medical school. So that is a quick way that I can think of a good example of portable access. So that's how I connected the Bernoulli equation to, the anatomy and physiology piece. So that's a quick way to show you how we help you make connections across different subject areas, okay? And believe me, MCAT, the way it is written right now, it is all about connecting different subjects in a question, okay? So that's what I say. It's not just It's not enough just to know everything there is to know about physics. You have to know and think outside the box and see how that relates. Because why else would they make you take physics if you're going to go into medicine, right? Well, you have to be able to understand all these things as it relates to the human body. So that's why it's important, and that's why they test it. All right. Well, a few closing comments. I hope that you guys enjoyed this presentation. And I'll tell you, we probably just touched maybe about 5 to 10% of what is actually on the pre-med academic success course. We did not even get to all the rest of the things, which is exam strategy, anxiety, time management, exam strategy. There's so other things that are valuable in this course, So the question I have for you is, are you ready to invest in yourself? Do you believe in the science of success? So the science of success requires knowledge and experience, and it requires an understanding on how to learn efficiently, not just for the long haul, but also to be able to apply that information to solve a problem, right? So the course that we put together, you will learn 8 key academic skills that correlate closely with success, right? And we created and curated this course using an evidence-based approach by me and the team of advisors with over 20 years of academic experience in medical education. So this stuff is not stuff that we just made up. It is stuff that is actually backed up by years of medical education-based experience. Don't bear the burden on your own. Use what is available. I wish I had access to these skills and information on day one of my pre-med years. I think I probably wouldn't have had trouble or issues in medical school once I got in there. But if I hadn't had that experience, then I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. So one last word of advice: change the way you think about yourself. Rely more on certainty, not just hope. Hope is good, but if you don't do anything to provide the circumstances to create certainty, then it's not going to be useful. Be real. Don't be a pretender. And that has a lot to do with mindset. Don't think that you can't do things. You can. It's just a matter of getting the strategy and getting the mentors and getting the things that you need, right? And then the other thing is, see yourself as an asset, not a liability, right? Because you can be both. You can be your best friend. You can be your worst enemy, okay? And focus on results, not just ideas. And the way the results happen is that you have to do things every day, right? You have to do things now. You can't wait for tomorrow. You can't wait for the next month. You have to start now, okay? So the greatest value lies within you, but you have to stop telling the stories you tell yourself, seize the moment, and invest in yourself, okay? All right, so that concludes our presentation for today. Oh, look, we just went over 10 minutes here. So thank you, Fred, Adriana, Sophia, and viewer 20. I don't know if viewer 20 if you didn't put their name on there, but I'm really glad that you guys were able to join us and participate in this. Do you all have any closing statements or questions that you guys want to maybe type about or chat about? Fred asked, how can I access this course? Very simple, Fred. I am going to send an email out and I can give you a link, or you can go to www.prometheus.org and click on courses and then figure out how you want to take your course, whether you want one-on-one or, which is the recommended one. You can also take it as a group. So if you and a few of your pre-med colleagues like Fred, Adriana, and Sophia want to get in with you and do a group rate, that's fine too. Or if you want to do self-guided, it's a different price. There's different price points for everybody. I will say this, there's always a way to work things out, so don't be scared by the price. If you reach out to us at info@prometheus.org or reach out to me at jvtovar, T as in Tom, O as in Victor, AR, at prometheus.org, we can always work payment plans and things of that nature. So don't be scared about the price tag. Think about what you need and think about the results that you're going to get. Okay? So anybody else have another question? I went ahead and posted the link there. You can go to www.prometheus.org/courses, and it should take you directly to the site. It should look like one of the slides that I showed you earlier. I'll just wait a few more minutes to see if Sophia or Adriana have any questions, or viewer 20, thank you for joining us. All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to helping either one of you. This course will be available. It's a recording, so it'll be available to anyone else once I send it out to the MetLife Club listserv. So thank you for joining us again, and I wish you the best in the future. Goodbye.